Hey guys, 90Red back again. Sorry for the delay. I didn't do any videos in the last 2 months because basically we've been locked down on Corona. And the one thing that I've got to say before we start this video is that in the description I've put a Patreon page just in case anyone wants to become a patron, be my guest. So getting to the topic at hand here in Italy, as you've heard on the news, yes, lots of people here in Italy have died. Me personally, I have not caught the coronavirus. I'm still alive, fortunately. And basically, to tell you the truth though, yes, it is true that here in Italy lots of people have died from the corona. And the problem that I have to say, the reason why most of these people have died is that 50 to 60% of the population is over 60. And you have to take into account that these people that are over 60, some of them, especially my grandfather, has seen the Second World War, have been in the Second World War or served, you know. So the problem is that when a COVID-19 or some virus or something like this hits the population and the governments start talking about, you know, potential wars and things like that, so that's going to add to the stress of the older population that's living here in Italy. And most people didn't really take that into account. You know, they didn't take into account, you know, the psychological factors that the elderly were dealing with basically here in Italy. I mean, let's face it. I mean, the COVID-19, I mean, the way it seems, I mean, it seems basically like war times in that sense, you know, so that's part of the reason. Another reason why here in Italy there's lots of COVID-19 is because in the beginning on the news you would hear about Chinese immigrants that would escape from China because they're trying to escape, you know, whatever they're trying to escape, trying not to get stuck in the COVID-19, stuck in a hospital, that kind of thing. That's understandable. And lots of people here in Italy, especially the Chinese people, have lots of relatives that are in China, and that's probably what added to the I'm not gonna say that the Chinese or the Americans are responsible or anything. I'm not going there. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just saying the potential causes of why people, you know, caught the COVID-19 here in Italy, basically. And that's one of the reasons, because you have to think that these old people in the Second World War, you know, they've went through some traumatic experiences, definitely. And I've heard, just to give you one example, my grandfather, I was talking to him a few years ago, and he told us how our next door neighbor, his grandfather basically, how during the Second World War he used to be part of the fascist regime. So, and that slips a little bit into the politics side of Italy in the sense that that's why the politics here in Italy are still kind of confusing, because lots of the older generations are still stuck on that Cold War, Second World War mentality kind of thing going on. So you have to put that into account though too. So moving on, talking about the coronavirus, another thing is outsourcing materials, masks and things like that. People were talking about toilet paper at the beginning, but I said, toilet paper, how can you make a mask out of toilet paper? Because toilet paper is not strong enough. I don't know where that was going. So the problem with Italy is that, especially in terms of like simple household materials, you know, anything from paper towels to like mechanical wrenches and things like that, they do import from China basically, and lots of companies have import from China and that sort of thing. And I will leave work and jobs and stuff for another episode, because this kind of ties into that. So outsourcing materials, basically masks and things like that. Lots of Italian companies buy from Chinese companies to fill their own stores and things like that. And one thing I have to give total respect to is the police force. And why do I say the police force? Is because the police force here in Italy is so understaffed that from what I've seen, been here in the years and around Italy, I've noticed that for every one carabiniere, every one police officer, there has to be at least 1,200 to at least 2,000 people. So you have to consider that underneath a pandemic, underneath all the crazy circumstances that have been going on, the police, I have to give my hats off to them because they did a pretty good job, you know. And most people will ask the question of how come the military intervened and got into the streets, and that's another subject I wanted to talk about, is that I'll just tell you a little story though to back that up. So basically, years ago, I was at a gym, at the old gym that I used to go to, and basically there was a young woman that came there, and she told me basically that because we started talking, you know, and I found out that she was actually a carabiniere. And the problem with that is that she told me that she did 5 years of military service in the Italian military, and then just to be even considered, you have to take this into account, just to be even considered to become a carabiniere, it took 2 years. 2 years of bureaucracy. That's exactly what she told me. So, I mean, that's part of the reason why you find up on the streets, especially in the news and everything, you see the military around helping the carabiniere, and that's the reason why the carabinieri have the military to back them up. And one thing that I don't think lots of people know this though, but the carabinieri don't exactly do part of the civilian police force. The carabinieri are actually a police force in the military, basically, in the Italian military. The real police here in Italy, the real, how do you say, civilian police would be the Polizia Municipale or the Polizia Locale. You see usually the blue cars, that sort of thing. That's one thing that people don't really take into account, is that the bureaucracy that it takes to become a carabiniere, and that's why the carabinieri were so understaffed during this pandemic, and they had to call in the military, which is not something new because they've done it in the past. To tell you the truth, I have never seen any carabiniere that is not Italian, basically. The only story that I've heard of a carabiniere that is not Italian was in Milan, and that was a Chinese police officer, basically. And that's basically how it is here in Italy. So, I mean, in that regards, I mean, the way the police force here in Italy seems, it kind of seems, I hate to put it that way, but I mean, that's what it is. I mean, I can't really, you know, it seems like basically it feels like America in the 60s, basically, in the sense that you had a whole, how do you say, white police force, basically. I don't know how any other way to put it, though. So, and lots of discrimination, lots of, I could understand in the South, yeah, obviously, I mean, the Italian carabinieri are going to have problems regarding the mafia and that sort of thing, trying to figure out, you know, who they can trust, and that's a whole another bag of, you know, problems right there, and that's understandable. Here in the North, that's one thing that I wanted to point out today, is that, you know, I don't understand how come, if the carabinieri are having problems with immigrants and things like that, how come they won't hire immigrants that, you know, are leading a good life? You know, they don't have any criminal past records or anything like that, and that's part of what the reason why the carabinieri basically are way understaffed in this whole pandemic in the last 2 months. And my hat goes off to them sincerely, because they had the most hardest job. I understand the hospitals, but I think the carabinieri had some of the worst jobs. And I've heard it straight from another police officer that told me one time off the record. He said that basically there would be sometimes that he would go for a traffic stop. We're talking about a regular traffic stop, and he would have people just mouthing off, just, you know, insulting him for no reason. It's a traffic stop. That's the thing that people don't understand. It's a traffic stop, you know? So it's like, And that just goes to show you how some people here in Italy really hate the Carabinieri, even though they don't even got a valid motive to hate them. So I don't know. That's just something that I wanted to point out. And the reason why lots of people, especially that were in here in Italy, didn't really cause too much chaos is because lots of people don't live in the cities. And even if the people lived in the cities, basically, the thing is that lots of people just pulled out on their balcony or whatever, their apartment, just pulled out a beach chair and just had a barbecue or whatever, So that's one thing that people don't really take into account, is that Italy is 3/4 farmland. So I can understand the big cities. Yeah, they had problems. Yeah, they had people doing crazy stuff. That's obvious, and especially down south. Because I heard down south, basically, in a news report that they were saying that people didn't have food. They didn't have money to buy food because jobs, they couldn't work, basically. And we're talking about people that live from paycheck to paycheck. And I really feel bad for these people, because that's the first thing that I said. I said, as soon as this pandemic started, I said, I think, because everybody was talking about economy at the time, I said, I think the economy should just freeze, the end of month bills and those sort of things, until the pandemic doesn't pass, at least those 2 or 3 months, at least, don't make people pay those things. It's just common sense. Because we are paying taxes, obviously, and the government is supposed to protect us. So in my opinion, I believe that it should have been, in the sense that they should have stopped, even in other countries, they should have stopped the economy just for a little bit. I don't think 2 months of not paying utility bills would really kill the economy. Think about it, all the taxes. Especially here in Italy, we pay lots of taxes on lots of things. So I was trying to figure out, that didn't really make any sense to me. That's just something that I want to put in there for food for thought, just something. And from a medical standpoint, a laboratory medical standpoint, I'd have to say that COVID-19, they said in the news, basically 15 days before you can go out and officially, and that's the strangest thing about here in Italy, is that even in the first week of the quarantine being over with, people were already going out, going to the bars and drinking and things like that. And I personally don't really see that as a safe thing to do. Obviously, everyone has their own opinion, and that's their problem. I don't really, everyone has their own opinion, basically. So, and the next thing I wanted to talk about is that, as I said before, is that lots of the older generations here have gone through the Second World War, or have seen the Second World War, or served in the military for those reasons. And one thing that I have to point out here that really, really, really pissed me off, in the sense of the younger generation, basically, what I heard from in the United States, from friends in the United States and friends abroad in other places in other countries and here in Italy, the one thing that I heard them say the most, the younger generation we're talking about, I'm from 85, I'm 34 years old right now. We're talking about the younger generations that are out today, that are still in school and things like that. And lots of them has said, I can't really blame them, because the politics, as I said before, lots of the politics are screwed up here in Italy, because most of the old people are still in that cold era, that Cold War era, communist regime kind of thinking. So every single time it comes up to a political candidate, I hate to go into politics, but that's how it is. You can't really escape that. So the one thing that really pissed me off, though, in regards to the younger generation is, I heard this from countless people, and they said, hey, who cares if the older generation die off, though? At least we'll have more space for the younger generation. At least we can breathe, especially politics, we can get rid of that. And that's where you're wrong. Yeah. Because as I pointed out to a few young people here in Italy, I said, the thing is that, imagine this, the pandemic is over, okay? Or the pandemic continues. Let's just say, for example, there's a war that breaks out. War might break out, whether it be a civil war or a third world war, war might break out. So, in the wartime, who would be better knowledgeable to help the civilian population to survive in these war times? And as you guessed it, the older generations, because basically the older generations have lived through these war times. As I said before, my grandfather was telling me that our next door neighbors in the past, the grandfather used to be a part of the fascist party. Not exactly part of the party, but he used to be, you know, a fascist, and he was basically, you know, rooting for the communist regime at the time. So that's something to put in mind. If a war happens, regardless of which country it is in, you have to understand that, and I say this to the young people out there, is that you can learn lots of things from people that have been in war times or have served in military service on how to survive or to fight, just in case you have to fight against an oppressive government. I'm just saying this because the first 13 years of my life, I lived in the United States. In the United States, they have a different mentality. The mentality is pretty much that, in the sense that it's written in the Constitution, obviously, how to, in the sense that the right to bear arms against an oppressive government. And that's one thing that most of the younger people that I've noticed here in Italy don't really take into recognition, is that if there is a war and the government starts to declare martial law or something like that, and the world in Italy goes into chaos, who is going to protect you? And most Italians in that front, you know, especially the Italians living in the cities, and we're talking about, you know, the Italians with their, you know, magical spritz and their, you know, elegant clothes and magic cars and yeah, okay. If a war happens, who is going to teach you how to survive, how to protect yourself? Me personally, I would rather have a war veteran or somebody that has been through the Second World War teaching me these things. It's one thing that I keep saying, though. I don't understand how come the younger generations treat so badly the older generations. I mean, I could understand this from the point of view from the older generation and the younger generation, but at the same time, I said, if there is a war, that's basically what's going to happen. So you're going to have to learn how to survive. And most of the city people over here, especially the younger people, will say, well, Italy's 3/4 farmland. I mean, we can go to the farms. They have plenty of food. And yeah, that's true, but, and the reason why I haven't turned the camera around yet is because, yeah, if a person from the countryside says, you know, well, or a person from the city, you know, says, hey, we can go to the countryside. They have lots and lots of food. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you can come here and basically you can, you know, give us a hand, you know. There's lots and lots of work to be done in the garden. And yes, right now I'm talking to you from my grandfather's personal tomato garden right here in the middle of the countryside, because as it is, I live in the city of Vicenza, but I don't live in the middle of the city. I live basically in the countryside, and that's one thing that I wanted to point out to all the city people out there that's listening and watching this video right now, is that if you come here, yes, we have chickens that you can eat. Yes, we have cows that you can milk in the morning. Yes, we have that. But just know that if you come here, you are going to be working. Yes, see the plow, pick up the plow, water the garden, because let's face fact, Italy has some good food, and this is where basically that good food happens. It takes time to grow, and it takes lots of love and effort to grow. So if anyone has any thoughts about, you know, well, if a war comes out, yeah, we're going to go to the countryside, they have plenty of food. Yeah, but we have lots of work too, you know. I mean, lots of work that, you know, as you can see, yeah. So that's my opinion on the thing here about the COVID-19 and everything that's been going on in the last few months. So one thing that I just wanted to say as a last thing is that all you older people and all you younger people from the younger generations, please, please, please put your pride, your ego, and everything else aside just for once and actually talk to each other. tell each other some stories that happened to you guys, some personal stories, something like that. Make a connection. Me personally, I've talked to many old people, whether it be here in Italy or in other countries, and they always have something funny and something cool to offer, even though they're from a different generation. I mean, me personally, I would say that it's been a really good experience to know some of the old people here in Italy, because they have different sense of humors, they like different music. I mean, it's good, you know. I mean, so the next time you're here in Italy, don't just stick to the cities or anything like that. Come to the farmlands, basically. Like, come to the farmlands and check it out for yourself. Let me step out here so I can show you guys what I mean by that. I'm living in the countryside. I don't live in the city. So basically, when the COVID-19 hit here in Italy, most of the people here said, well, doesn't really change anything for me. I can still go out, till my farmland. But apparently it was the first month most of the farmers couldn't go out and till their land, and that really pissed a lot of people off. So that's one thing that they don't really cover in the media too much. But anyway, after that month was over, lots of the farmers came out and everything, and most of the people that lived in the countryside over here said, you know, basically pulled out a lawn chair, pulled out a barbecue grill, and said, we're just gonna wait. So let me just show you guys out here what I mean by countryside. It's like, it's early in the morning over here, so we're gonna have to dig out of here. Oh, whew, it is hot in there. Oh my God. Whew. Yes, welcome to the Italian countryside. And just know, like I said before, if there is a war or if there is a shortage of food, you just know we have lots of work here for you. Back here, let's just walk out here so I can show you guys a little bit of the countryside here I'm talking about. Guess my grandfather is growing some more of his vineyard back there. I thought he wasn't going to grow any this year, but apparently he's secretly growing some. Yeah. And that's the thing, though. That's one thing that I'm going to say for another video here in Italy about how do you call the countryside, and basically what the farmers do in sense of with their vineyards, because most of the vineyards here, they don't really sell to people. Most of the people that have vineyards here, especially private gardens, they create their own wine and then they just drink it for themselves. I mean, why wouldn't you not? I mean, it's legal, so you're not selling it, so there's no taxes or anything. You can make your own wine, and basically, yeah. I mean, if you make your own food, you know, as I showed you before, we were just in the tomato garden, you know. So that's, I just want to end the video here, and got our neighbor's dog over here barking at me for some reason. Guess he hasn't seen me in a while. I mean, I personally haven't been out here in a while. I've been kind of just closed in the house lately, just watching the news and basically just sitting there, basically. I haven't really been doing much. And lately, yeah, Italy has been, it's been raining a few days, like it's been a few weeks that it's been raining, but I mean, the fields are nice and, you know, they're nice and good, they're growing good. I don't know whose field this is. I think this is the neighbor's back here somewhere or something, but anyway. So that's just what I wanted to say about the COVID-19 today, and I hope you guys enjoyed it, learned a little bit of something about Italy in that sense, in that regard of everything considered this coronavirus epidemic. I hope it goes away a long time, and stay tuned for another video in the future. Peace.